Hello and welcome to a brand new special episode of Popcorn Podcast with Leigh and Tim, where we sit down with the co-writer and director of Skincare, Austin Peters. I'm Timmy Flan, movie buff.
And I'm Leigh Livingstone, entertainment journalist.
That was a little sing-song to that, Timothy.
Yeah.
And we love to talk all things movies.
We do. Skincare is a sunshine noir following Hope Goldman, a skin specialist to LA's elite who is about to take her career to the next level by launching her own skincare line. However, when a rival opens a boutique directly across from her store, Hope begins to suspect that someone is trying to sabotage her. So she tries to unravel the mystery of who is attempting to destroy her life.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
Well, Skincare is directed by Austin Peters from a screenplay by Sam Freelick, Austin Peters, and Deering Regan.
Skincare stars Elizabeth Banks, Louis Pullman, Luis Gerardo Mendez, Nathan Fillion, MJ Rodriguez, and Eric Palladino.
Our special podcast guest on Popcorn Podcast today is filmmaker Austin Peters, whose stylistic approach to directing has him in hot demand with some of the most creative people in the music world. He has directed music videos for the likes of Haim, Churches, Bastille, and helmed campaigns for Vogue and American Express, just to name a few.
In 2017, Peters directed the feature documentary Give Me Future about the free Major Lazer concert in Havana, Cuba. The film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was one of the first films acquired by Apple as the company moved into the entertainment space.
That's pretty cool. Well, Skincare marks his narrative feature debut and is loosely inspired by the real-life case of facialist to the stars Dawn DeLuise, who was accused in 2014 of attempting to hire a hitman to take out her business rival and was eventually found not guilty.
It's a wild story, though, and it makes the basis for a wild and visually arresting film in the vein of Adam Sandler's Uncut Gems.
Which was one of the most anxiety-inducing films of recent years, I have to say. Loved it, by the way. Peters joins us today to take us behind the scenes of Skincare, his star-studded narrative debut, which almost saw the end of Elizabeth Banks, like for real.
For real. But thank God she was saved.
The stars, the gods were looking down on us to save Elizabeth Banks. And he also shares in some Mulholland Drive reverie. So let's take a listen.
I don't think it's about the skin you start out with. I think it's about what are you willing to do to get to where you want to be.
It's correct that this is your first major narrative feature, right?
Yeah, this is my first scripted feature film.
What a cast together for your first one out of the gate, huh?
It turned out pretty nice in that way, for sure. Feel pretty fortunate to be able to work with such an incredible group of actors.
Who came on first?
Elizabeth.
So she sort of got it off and running for you?
You know, we always knew that we had to cast the Hope Goldman role first because she's in every single scene and it's her movie, you know, and it felt like everyone had to be cast sort of in relation to her, you know, to make sense. And so knowing who she would help make those decisions. Elizabeth was someone that we always talked about and someone that we always dreamed about. And it felt like a pipe dream. We would just always say, there's just no way that she's such a massive star and she's such a massive producer and director. Why would she want to do a dark little indie movie like this? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. So we sent it to her. Just, you know, you kind of say, oh, it's your first choice. Let's get turned down and then we'll go somewhere else, you know? And then she read the material and she really responded to it and wanted to get on a Zoom with me. And so we Zoomed, and within the first 15 minutes, it was super clear that she saw the movie on the page that we were trying to make and that I wanted to make. And that was kind of the start. And then once that happens, then suddenly it feels like a real movie. Like that's, you know, like you said, that must be cool for your first movie. That moment when she signed on felt like, wow, we might actually make this movie.
How long were you working on it before got to actual filming?
Maybe 5 years, something like that.
Wow.
Maybe 5 or 6 years. So the script, I could check, and I probably should have checked. The script was first brought to me by the writers when I was in Havana, Cuba, shooting the last leg of a documentary that I directed that we shot out there.
So you're obviously no stranger to working with big name stars or running a set for that matter. Like, you know what you're doing. But how did it feel stepping out on location for that first day of filming?
The first day was crazy. I mean, it was fortunately the first day was pretty easy. The first week was insane, but the first day we was all the car stuff, everything that we shot basically on the LED screen. It was pretty controlled. I was just obviously incredibly nervous and incredibly excited, and then you don't know what's gonna happen. It's the unknown. You're jumping into the pool, but at the end of the first day, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I've been on a set before. And I felt like I had forgot that I
Yeah.
had been on literally hundreds of sets.
Yeah.
This just felt like, my whole life had been leading up to this moment to direct a narrative feature, which has always been my aspiration, So it was nerve-wracking initially, and it was stressful the whole time, but it also felt incredibly good and was so fun and like so exciting every day. The second you get to see some of these actors make choices with the words that have been on paper for 5 years, suddenly you forget that you only slept 4 hours the night before and you've been working for 16, and you're like, oh, let's keep going. The producer says, no, we have to go home. This is it. It's over.
You said like everything had been leading up into this point, but why was now the right time to make that leap?
I think it's just the way it happens. I think that I had been wanting to make a narrative feature forever, and I had been looking for something to do. And when I became attached to this project, I thought it was really exciting, and we just worked on the script for a long time, and then we kind of have to put all the pieces together. And my manager always tells me that making movies is like molasses until it's not, and that's sort of what it feels like. It felt like it was moving so slowly for so long, and then suddenly it's like green light, you have 18 days to shoot.
Was it really 18 days?
Yeah.
Wow, that is some fast filmmaking.
Yeah, it was fast. It was fast.
And this is inspired by a wild true story that I hadn't heard of until I watched the film, about a skin specialist and a supposed murder plot. When did you come across this story? Had you heard it before the script landed on your desk?
It was sort of one of these things that was in the ether and in Los Angeles, and just that it was sort of, a little bit of local news and that sort of thing, but I didn't really know much about it. And it was sort of our point of departure, it was something that's sort of what was the inspiration. And then beyond that, we sort of just moved on and decided very early on that we didn't want to tell that story. And instead, what we wanted to do was create a work of fiction that was inspired by that and inspired by the movies that we loved and the art that we loved and the books that we loved, that were sort of all sort of funneling into this idea of what this movie could be.
The real story even involves some connections to the bling ring burglaries at celebrities' homes. We'd heard about that over here in Australia. Was Lewis Pullman's character a sort of amalgamation of Nick Prugo and the other guy, I think, was it Feinstein?
Lewis Pullman's character is an invention of the writers and myself and Lewis, who brought it to life, obviously, as you've seen in the film.
I've seen this described as sunshine noir, which I love that term so much, which it's a very specific subgenre that works specifically well in LA, doesn't it? Like that, and this high-end world of skincare. What were you looking for in the main set to sort of bring that to the forefront?
Well, I think that, this movie is about a lot of beautiful people doing really ugly things. And that was sort of the central sort of visual dichotomy of the movie, was this beauty and grit and beauty and ugliness. And when we say sunshine noir, it was always about taking these dark, seedy underbelly noir moments and bringing them into the sunshine, the brutal heat of the, Los Angeles sun, and giving them heat stroke, basically. So I think that, the location we shot at was super helpful was our first choice, because I wanted to shoot in Hollywood, in LA, which was a very challenging thing to do for a movie of our size. But this place that we shot, the Crossroads of the World, it's kind of the perfect intersection of old classic Hollywood, and while still being a real place that you can visit, and still being surrounded by what is now contemporary gritty Hollywood, or 2013 Hollywood. And it's sort of funny because it has its own amazing history. Alfred Hitchcock's office was there, among many other interesting sort of films that are shot there. Kermit the Frog's office was there in a certain Muppet film. I don't remember which one.
Oh yeah, no, I think I've walked past there, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
It's amazing. It's amazing looking. It's architecturally incredible. And so I just felt like if we could use this as our central complex, we would be able to really elevate the world of the film while still keeping it totally grounded in reality.
Are you an Angelino born and bred? Are you from the area?
I am, yeah. I was born here in St. John's Hospital.
So you know it intimately then. This is
Yes.
your world.
Yes, absolutely. I moved away when I was 18, but I came back 3 years ago after a long time in New York.
How would you describe the film to someone who hasn't, seen it obviously yet?
Like a synopsis of the film?
Yeah,
or
no, not a synopsis, but in your own words. What was it that sort of hooked you into it?
What hooked me into it was sort of this story, this sunshine noir story of, complicated, often problematic characters getting in way over their heads, and these decisions that they make sort of ramping up and ramping up and ramping up until they're speeding to collision towards one another. And so in that way, I loved it as a anxiety thriller, where you're watching feeling so anxious. And we've had a couple times screening the movie for audiences where people are screaming at the audience like, no, don't do that,
Yes.
And when that happens, I think, okay, yes, this is the movie that I wanted to make.
Especially with the character of Hope Goldman, I was feeling the same way, where I was kind of watching what she was doing and I was like, oh God, she's the worst, but also she's the best. And then it got to the end, and I don't want to spoil it for our listeners, but the speech that she gives at the end when it's all wrapping up and she's just like babbling away and just so narcissistic. It's hilarious.
Oh, I love that. That is so great to hear you say, because that was the movie we were trying to make.
Yeah. I mean, Elizabeth Banks is just fantastic as well.
Yeah, she's incredible. Really was a joy, like I said, every day to see her be this character.
Yeah. I mean, and you almost lost her at one point. So I've read that she's been talking about like a choking incident that she had on the set.
Yeah. Julius, one of the Teamsters, saved her.
That's
and we were
crazy.
shooting a take and she just showed up and was like, I almost just choked to death. And I said, excuse me? Like, oh, Julia saved me. But she's such a machine. Like, she was affected by it, but she also was then ready to do the scene.
Yeah.
You know?
Almost spoiled by a pea. That's just crazy. Music is obviously so important to your work and your past work. And the soundtrack and music in this film is so important as well. It's telling as much of the story about the time and the place as the words are. But how did that fit into the puzzle of putting this together for you?
That was really sort of the last piece. Like, there were certain music cues and needle drops that I had known I wanted from the beginning. And I knew that I wanted to use top 40 music from the time. And I knew that in Los Angeles and in many cities, you go from space to space and there's all these different radios playing different styles of music all the time, and you can be in a public place having a really dark moment and they can be playing some very summery top 40 music very loudly over the radio. And having experienced that personally, like, that was a feeling that I wanted to convey in the movie. And and there were some other songs that I knew I wanted to be in it, but then getting that only came after the edit was locked. And that was the work of Tiff Anders, our amazing music supervisor. And then the last piece really was the score. And that was by Fatima Al-Qadiri. And I had watched a movie that she had scored called Atlantics from 2019, Madi Diop's movie, which was a Senegalese movie. And I loved the score, and I wrote her name down right when I watched it the first time. And I had heard it before. I was aware of her as an artist, but I didn't know that she scored films. And I was immediately sort of thinking, oh, she would be great for skincare. What would it be like to hear her music set in the world of this film? So then that was the last stage, really, before sound mix and color was just working with her every day on the music as she composed and sent me ideas.
It really does take you straight to that era. Like, I just felt like I was transported back to to that time and place. It was really nostalgic. Before I let you go, we're all about celebrating the joy of cinema here at Popcorn Podcast. So can you remember a time, whether it was recently or early in the past, where you felt pure joy watching something on screen?
Gosh, all the time. I'm trying to think what was the most recent of those. Can I look at my Letterboxd and see what my diary says?
Oh, you're on Letterboxd. Okay, we've got to follow you.
Yeah, I'm covert. I'll text you my name.
Okay.
I'm just looking through here. I'm like, wow, there's so many that I just was just loving it. I went and saw Mulholland Drive the other day at the Academy Museum in Los Angeles, and that movie is just, I've seen it so many times and it's just a masterpiece. It's obviously such an inspiration for everything, but the tonal oscillations and that, the way it's just so funny at times and then becomes so scary and then becomes so sad, and the way it's in conversation with the history of cinema and old kind of styles of movie and old Hollywood and Sunset Boulevard, and while also being so singular, and also the way that the acting is in that film, that it's just so unbelievable and so fearless and so masterfully calibrated that when I watched it the other day at the Academy Museum, I felt euphoric throughout. I just thought it was amazing.
And Naomi Watts, woo!
I mean, she's just so unbelievable in that movie. The scene that I can't stop talking about is when she does her audition, and the whole time she's kind of this bright-eyed, innocent, almost like cartoony, character. And the way that she sort of takes that, the way that she's playing this character in a way that feels like it could be two-dimensional, but she gives it so much depth that then just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper throughout the film. And then she does this, when she does her acting, it suddenly becomes like hyper-realism, it just is it's so incredible. And, what another great gift that film gave to American audiences is Naomi Watts.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love hearing passionate film lovers talk about film. It really gets you going. Thank you so much for sharing that, Austin.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it.
I really appreciate talking to you. Thanks for watching the movie. I hope to talk to you soon.
What do I do?
Take control of your narrative. Sometimes you have to start a fire to put it out.
Tim, don't you just love getting lost in the joy of cinema with our guests? I think it's one of my absolute favourite things about what we do is just sharing in that excitement of a movie that really stays with you for whatever reason.
And you know what? The myriad of different responses and reactions I just love, because they feel, we've asked this question a few times now in our interviews of late, and they feel overwhelmed with the task of trying to hone it down. But then they just listen to themselves in that experience, and it just unearths this wonderful conversation after. I think it's fantastic too.
Yeah, and I just found myself pulled back into the feeling I got watching Mulholland Drive and seeing Naomi Watts just smashing it on the screen like David Lynch's style. It's incredible film, and I just got swept up in the emotion as well.
Love it. Well, Peters is one to watch, and his connection with music makes for a visceral film that pulls you in. We can't wait to see what he does next.
And Skincare is in US and Canadian cinemas from August 16, and we'll have a worldwide release at a later date, so keep an eye out for it.
As always, friends, thank you so much for listening and joining us for this special interview episode of Popcorn Podcast, where we sat down with Austin Peters, the co-writer and director of Skincare.
And we'll catch you next time.
Come and join in on the conversation about the latest movies. You can follow us and share your film thoughts with us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Letterboxd.